Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. You know, it's funny. I've said for the last couple weeks, it feels like Arkansas is a little bit of the quote-unquote black cloud of college basketball, but they just got that win at Kentucky. They're playing well. And so the black cloud honor, you know, I don't know who it goes to. Is it North Carolina? Is it this team? Is it that team? I think the answer to me is very clearly the Indiana Hoosiers, okay? So Indiana, it's been a debacle. We've talked about them before. We talked about them after the loss to Illinois. What does it mean for Mike Woodson? All that good stuff. Well, I will tell you what. In a season where Indiana has not been afraid to completely roll over and die, they may have set a new impressive moment in terms of just rolling over and quitting. Okay. By the way, I know Indiana lost to Illinois in what was obviously the biggest loss in program history at home, but that might even fall back behind what happened on Tuesday night in Madison, Wisconsin. Okay, so they're playing the Wisconsin Badgers, who are actually pretty good. Just think about this. They fall down 8-0. Then they fall down 16-2. They fall down 24-4, and it got as bad as 29-8 with 11:30 to go. 29-8. They were down 29-8, down 21 points 9 minutes into the game. Now, of course, from there, they did enough to make it close, to make it competitive, to make it respectable. Make no mistake, this was an embarrassing moment for a historically great team. As I just said, no excuses, play like a champion. Indiana is not. And so we're not even going to talk about the game itself, but we got to talk about what's next. What does Indiana do? Because this is a debacle. Okay. By the way, I'm wearing red, but it's definitely not an Indiana shirt. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and dive in. And listen, I could do the thing where I say, oh, you know, at the 9-minute mark, this happened. At the 7-minute mark, that happened. It's like, we're not going to do that. You know why we're not going to do it? Because they were down 29-8 after the first 9 minutes of the game. They quit. They rolled over. And by the way, I got to say, even for a team that has not been afraid to quit this season, that was like a historic quit job in the middle of a Big Ten road game for all the nation to see, okay? They've had bad moments. They got blown out by Louisville in the Bahamas. Got blown out by Gonzaga in the Bahamas. Got blown out by Illinois a few weeks ago, as we just discussed. But 29-8 at Wisconsin, that's just all-time bad stuff, okay? And so, like I said, I could spend some time talking about whatever, you know, well, if they did this, it doesn't really matter. Because the bottom line is this team is terrible. And I think what's especially frustrating for Indiana fans is Indiana is a prideful place. And, you know, we don't have to get into the whole history of things. But, like, listen, I do believe that certain teams, certain programs, there's a certain expectation on how they play, how they look, all of that. You know, I live in LA, and I remember, you know, talking to UCLA coaches. You know, you can't just win at UCLA. You got to kind of win with style and flair, kind of that Showtime Lakers vibe. You know, UConn fans are you know, I grew up in Connecticut. Now I'm in LA, obviously. And with UConn, it's like, you need to be tough. You can't show up and be soft and get pushed around. And I think there is a pride that is expected to come with Indiana that just isn't there. We've talked about the not showing up stuff, but it's the fact that it's just a number of different things. Sometimes you don't show up. Sometimes you score. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes Oumar Ballo is great. Sometimes he's terrible. Sometimes the three-point shooting is good enough. Sometimes it's terrible. Like, you look at Tuesday night. I mean, Oumar Ballo is a guy that has been, what do you have, like 21-14 against Ohio State a few weeks ago? Takes 3 shots in the loss to Wisconsin. And so at this point, it's just bad. The Mike Woodson era is coming to an end. A couple things on that. You know, one, I sort of whiffed on that, the Mike Woodson era, because to me, what's kind of crazy is if you go back to all the criticism that I had of Mike Woodson when he got hired, I just didn't know if he'd be able to recruit, right? Like, I thought the X's and O's would be fine. I thought the X's and O's would be, hey, he's coming from the NBA. All these NBA guys are X's and O's guys. And I thought, okay, he'll be okay in the X's and O's department. It's where it's the recruiting is going to be able to handle the portal. And he's been great in recruiting. Now, I didn't love all the pieces that they brought in. I thought Oumar Ballo was a little bit overrated, but he's still really good. I loved Miles Rice. I loved Cannon Carlisle. I loved Mackenzie Mbako when they committed. So the recruiting hasn't been the issue. It's been the coaching, it's been the X's and O's, and it's been the motivation and effort. I saw some Indiana fan, I don't know who it was, said like the crazy part about Woodson is like when he was a player, he was known as being the effort, energy, want to guy. And so to see his teams not even play with any pride is sort of incredible. And it sort of speaks to like, yeah, change is definitely coming in this program. Okay. And so listen, I've seen other places like, oh, I think it might be time. It's like, no, it's time. And I can tell you, I've already started making calls on this. I think it's the type of situation where it's not just that like they're going to fire him. I think he's ready to move on. It almost reminds me of like Juwan Howard last year at Michigan, where it got so bad and he was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to, I just don't want to be the coach of this team in this era. I came back to college from the NBA. I thought it was going to be one thing. It's another thing. This isn't the right fit for me or my personality. And so I just think he's ready to move on. Like I've heard so much is like, he's ready to move on. He doesn't want to do this. And like, he'll help the next coaching staff. Like maybe not obviously, be part of the hiring process, but like he loves Indiana. He's from Indiana. And if he needs to make a phone call to a current player of, hey, you need to stay, he's willing to do those kinds of things. But I think he's ready to move on. And so with it, let me say this. We're going to spend a lot of time probably over the next 5 weeks talking about who's going to be the next Indiana head coach. By the way, as producer Matt points out, make sure you're following our Torres on IU page, Torres on Indiana page. We just brought on Carter, an IU student on campus to help us run that page. He's doing a great job. But, we're going to have a lot of coaching news, rumors, innuendo. So make sure you're following Torres on Indiana on Twitter, okay? Bring it up to very simply say, let's talk about this job, because I think there's this notion of, oh, Indiana, they're a product of the bygone era and nobody wants to coach there. I actually think it's the exact opposite. I think they're going to get candidates interested in this job that wouldn't have normally been interested even 4 or 5 years ago. First of all, the idea that this isn't a good job or it's nonsense, okay? I understand the Woodson coaching search was a little bit clunky, but there were no great candidates that year. And what I would also say, go back to the Woodson, the hires before Woodson. Archie Miller, it didn't work out. Archie Miller was the hottest mid-major head coach at the time, had led Dayton to an Elite Eight, and Indiana was the one that got him. Tom Crean, we can make fun of it now, had Marquette rolling at a really high level. Kelvin Sampson, it obviously didn't end well, but it's very clear that was a good hire. So like this idea that people don't want the Indiana job, I just don't believe it. And I do think, with the NIL that they put into this team, I think there's a lot of people sit there saying, well, wait a second now. Like, they're going to put that much money into this team and it didn't go well. I can go there and I'm going to have the resources that I need to compete at the highest level. And so to me, listen, I do think that it is a situation where more people are going to be interested than you think. And again, we're going to do a lot of candidate stuff over the next couple of weeks. But, and by the way, we did some candidate stuff a few weeks ago. The names that do come to mind to me, listen, first of all, he's going to say no, but you got to call. You got to call Brad Stevens, right? And Brad Stevens, Indiana guy, coached at Butler, all that good stuff. He's not going to take the job. He's still, I think, as crazy as it sounds, because he's been around forever, I think he's still got kids in like high school. And so I think that he is happy at he's happy at whatchamacallit. He's happy with the Boston Celtics. He's happy not coaching. He's happy going to his kids' games. But listen, I do think you have to call. If you remember when Woodson was hired, what was it, like a 7-year, $70 million deal that Woj reported was offered at the time? So I still think you got to make the call, even if it's not likely. I think what's kind of interesting, and I'm seeing this in the chat right now, Billy Donovan, I believe on my grave that if Kentucky had waited, would have been interested. Well, Billy Donovan's about to get fired by the Chicago Bulls. Chicago Bulls just traded Zach LaVine. We don't talk much NBA on this show. Chicago Bulls right now are the 10 seed in the playoffs. Would Billy Donovan just lose enough games so they can fire him so that he could get a college job? But listen, I think Billy Donovan's a name that you have to call. Billy Donovan, we've talked about this. First of all, again, I think he would have been interested in the Kentucky job if Mitch Barnhart had been willing to wait. But beyond that, it sounds crazy. Billy Donovan is still only 59 years old. And so in this era, coming from the NBA, like if you can hire a 73-year-old Bill Belichick to take a college basketball job, if you could hire a 63-year-old Mike Woodson, go ahead and hire Billy Donovan. And I don't think that he wants to get out of coaching completely. even if he is, frustrated, whatever, with listen, I'm tripping over my words here. With Billy Donovan, he left college because he was frustrated with the state of college basketball when he left. But it is more of a professional model, NIL model. We heard Hubert Davis talk about hiring a GM. I would assume he would bring a GM with him. And I think in some ways it's a more attractive model for guys like Billy Donovan. So you got to call Brad Stevens. Billy Donovan, I can't imagine he's brought back to the Bulls after the season. And would he want to come back? They just traded Zach LaVine, their best player, right? Got to make sure that's right. I think they traded Zach LaVine. I don't even follow the NBA. So trade Zach LaVine. They just traded their best player. They're probably going to miss the playoffs. Billy Donovan's probably going to be fired. You got to make that call. And then I think there's a lot of college guys that want that job or would be interested or would at least take a call. Chris Beard. I thought it was very interesting, by the way. Halftime of the Ole Miss Kentucky game on Tuesday night, Chris Beard was asked about his team playing this, and this. He goes, listen, that's the old Bob Knight style. You got to do this and this to win a game. Remember, Chris Beard was a Bob Knight disciple. It was at Texas Tech, but it doesn't change the fact that, he has great reverence for Bob Knight, and I can see a scenario where he would be interested. We've talked about Dusty May, that small buyout at Michigan. Would he be interested? And so you go on and on down the list. And I just think that is a more attractive job than a lot of people realize.